Thank you very much, Ron, for your very kind, long introduction. Most of it is not deserved, but yes, that is what I've been working for the last 20 years. When I was asked to speak here and deliver perhaps opening kind of states, I see this address more as a state-setting address. I wondered, okay, firstly, I turned 60 last year, so theoretically, according to MIPA, I've become an older person. I also have been working on this at the regional level, literally for the last 20 years. And I've seen these issues go from the margins to the center. And there's a reason for that. And last but not least, I felt it was a great honor to be invited by Sao Foundation. And I'd like to acknowledge the leadership and the space that Sao Foundation now fills at the regional level, especially in rallying the organizations of older persons. We have, and really bringing them together to provide a real voice to older persons. And thank you very much, Marianne, for really working with us and putting the civil society voice strongly in the discourse that's happening at the regional level. I'd just like to start by saying that the demographic shift, and Paul said a lot of things that I wanted to say, but I think that it bears reinforcement. Maybe a lot of what I say today, now, over the next few minutes, will be something that you know, but maybe I'm going to show different perspective to it. I want to tell you why it matters to more countries other than Singapore, and why Singapore's experience may be relevant to the rest of our region. The demographic shift, sometimes, people have a feeling that it's something that's going to happen in the future. Well, it's happening right now. It's happening right now, and we need to, and often it's seen when you look at it as a disaster, as something that's going to, as a cataclysm that's going to hit us. Well, it's something that you plan for as well. It's something that our policies would inevitably lead to if they were successful. What we need to do is adjust our policies and systems. And as a friend, old friend who's the HelpAge regional representative, Eduardo Klein, says, we need to reimagine aging. Maybe we need to reframe aging so that we move from a burden aging to move from the concept of burden to opportunity and from decline to dignity. And that's what I hope that we will be able to. And like Paul says, this is the beginning of a conversation. And these are some of the elements or data, information that allow us to get us thinking. Yeah. My presentation is going to maybe provide, like I said, the regional picture. Maybe remind you of the magnitude and scale of what's happening. I'm going to highlight some of the key needs of older persons and how well are we really fulfilling them? How prepared are we for this transition that's going to take place? I'm going to highlight areas for urgent action. And like Paul said, maybe many of these are questions that we have to find answers to. The questions may change depending on, the answers may differ slightly depending on the context. But I think we need to find that we know the answers, but perhaps action is required. And so that's going to be the objective of my presentation. Now, demographic trends are one of the 5 mega trends that were identified by the UN Economist Network way back in 2020. They are along with emerging and frontier technologies, the very rapid urbanization, very rapid rise in inequalities, along with climate change and environmental degradation. But the point is, we'll make a mistake if you look at demographic trends as a silo. I think it's related to all the others and is impacted by all the others. The way we use emerging and frontier technologies will determine how well we deal with this demographic transition that I will be talking about. Rapid urbanization is part of the demographic trend, and it has an impact on the way we deal on the lives of older persons. Inequalities. Well, sometimes we tend to paint older persons with a single brush. Well, the inequalities that you face at your younger age and right throughout your life course will determine how well you fare as an older person. Well, the place of your birth, what kind of income level that we are born into, what access you have to education and healthcare, and also will determine definitely the way you age and the way how well you'll do as an older person. So inequalities, older persons are not equal, or the way they're faced with vulnerabilities, and you see this in conversations. Some of us who are more, say, fortunate tend to see different issues as being of importance, whereas people who are at the other end of the spectrum may find the basic needs also difficult to access. And last but not least, climate change and environmental degradation. I think it's important to look at this. Often older persons are seen as people who are impacted by it, which is true. They are disproportionately impacted, but they have a lot to offer in terms of solutions. I think older persons are resourced. So that's why there's a big intersection with all this. And also, there is also the bigger picture of demographic trends, the way fertility rates are falling across, and the efforts that many countries are making in order to push them up, sometimes to say that, but sometimes what is the carrying capacity of the planet? So demographic change and the changes that are taking place are inextricably linked to the way we deal with climate change and environmental degradation. I think this is a little stubborn sometimes. Maybe it's better to ask for the next slide. Now, why is this dramatic, many of you say dramatic demographic transition happening? And this slide, more than anything else, illustrates the dramatic demographic transition that's taking place in our region. As you can see, fertility rates have plunged from somewhere almost 6 in 1970 down to less, and they will come down by 2050 to less than 2, almost 1.8. And even now, in 2025, they are less than 2, well below replacement rate. So that you're looking at a dramatic drop in fertility. And you can see life expectancy has grown from below 50 in 1950. Now it's touched 80, and by 2050, it'll be well above 80 years of age. So what has that resulted in? And that has resulted in a very, very quick and dramatic rise in the proportion of older persons. And it has happened at a pace which is much faster than any other region of the world. Europe went through this process, but it went through it a lot more gradually. It was like climbing up a simple, nice walk up a small slope. But Asia is having to climb a steep cliff here. And so it means lesser time to adjust. It also means that a lot of our policies have not had time to catch up. So that means there's a lot of work to be done. But this is the result of policies. You extended healthcare, life expectancy went up. You extended the choice, the reproductive choice to women, fertility rates went down. Yes, some of those choices are maybe made because sometimes women don't have an opportunity to work if they have children. Maybe there are other issues that have to be addressed, but this is largely a success. It's just that we haven't had time to adapt, or haven't had sometimes the vision to adapt, which we need to get in now. So I would say that it is important to look at this as an achievement, but we need to, the societies of the future are going to be older. Whether I know people are trying to correct the sharp drop in fertility. In fact, in the Finance and Development Journal of IMF, there's an article on the demographic change. They're putting it, more and more articles coming in IMF journals on demographic change. They acknowledge that, yes, efforts to reset fertility rates are having limited success. Maybe Republic of Korea had a slight uptick. But in the foreseeable future, we have to live with societies which are going to be considerably older than before. So that's something we have to take as a given. Next slide, please. Now, just to give you, I'll quickly go through this. The number of older persons have multiplied 8 times, eightfold from 1950. And from 2025 to 2050, they're going to again double from a much bigger base. So what are you looking at? It's really aging very, very fast and very large proportion. We're going to reach 1.3, as you can see, in terms of 1.3 billion older persons. Next slide, please. Now, I would like to focus on a distinction here that the number of oldest old is also growing tremendously, the 80-plus population, which has totally different. We have implications for care, for healthcare, and for allowing them a quality of life. So if you look at the oldest old, that is also one of the fastest growing segments. In 1990, they constituted 14% of older persons, which is about 24 million people. But fast forward to 2020, 2050, which is going to be less than in about 25 years from now, we're going to have about 280 million older persons above 80 years of age, constituting 28% of the population of older persons. That means you really have to look at their needs and the way that they have to be cared for. And this is just the sheer numbers that you have. These numbers are important to take into account that sometimes we think it's very far away, but 25 years goes just like that. Wasn't it just yesterday that we had the millennium celebrations? And before you know, you're in 2025. So it's not very far away. And I'm very happy to see a lot of younger people here. And it's part of our intergenerational effort. But I hope that all of you will contribute and understand how we can work together. Next slide, please. Now, sometimes when we had this discussion way back, you have certain countries which feel that they're very far away. This applies to only developed countries in our region. But aging is not something that is restricted to developed countries anymore. It's become a region-wide phenomenon. Let me start in 1990. In 1990, only 9.2% of the countries in our region, as you can see, which is about 7 countries, had a population percentage of older persons between 7 to 14%. So they were considering they had an aging population. Right now, in 2024, last year when we had our population data sheet that came out, we found that 2 countries, which is 2.7% of the countries, are super aged. That means they have populations which are beyond, in terms of 14%, beyond 21%. And 6.4%, that is 7 countries, are between 14 to 21%. And 75.8% of the countries, which is 22 countries, are between 7 to 14% aging. So as you can see, very large number of countries are aging, and there are significant numbers, 7 countries which are aged, and 2.7 countries, 7% which are super aged. But what will happen in 25 years from now, in 2050? 19 countries will be super aged, about 21 years above, with the population percentage of older persons about 21%. 10 will be aged, and 24 will be aging. That leaves almost no country which is going to be not going through this process at all. That is why I think issues related to population aging should not be restricted to the social development ministries, should not be restricted to side discussions, but has to become a central part of policy making. And countries are acknowledging that. A few are setting up national coordination ministries. But it is not just about, it's going to have an impact on the economy, how you deal with older persons. It's going to have an impact on societies. So countries which are far-sighted enough to acknowledge that are moving, understanding that population aging policies have to be at the center, have to be multi-sectoral. Next slide, please. Now, I wanted to reduce, I had many slides, but I wanted to compress them. I wanted to understand, one, we all know that women live longer than men. So when you look at beyond 60, population beyond 60, so population aging sometimes has a very strong gender perspective. The more women in that age group. But to add to it, but it doesn't mean there is a considerable, we here plotted the life expectancy at 60 and healthy life expectancy at 60. What does it tell you? It tells you that a considerable part of our lives beyond 60 is going to be spent in disability and ill health. There's a big gap between healthy life expectancy and life expectancy at 60. So that is a significantly large percentage. It's larger in some countries and smaller in some countries. Now, I'll tell you what is the gender perspective to this. It's my favorite story when you look at women often, when they get married in Asia Pacific, are about 4 years on an average younger to their spouse, on an average, singularity year of marriage. And they, on an average, outlive their spouses by another 4 to 5 years, depending on the country context, life expectancy at 60. So what does that tell you? That often when the man is disabled, the older person, the wife is more often than not there to look after. But once the man passes away, the woman has about 8 to 10 years to live, often in disability, often without income security. And in countries where, universal healthcare is still in the process, maybe without access to healthcare. That is why the gender perspective to the entire aging issue is very, very important for us to acknowledge. We have to acknowledge that older women have specific needs that we need to really address. Next slide, please. Now, this is universal health coverage is really the necessary first step if you want to address the needs of older persons. If you look at the biggest need of older persons, it would be access to healthcare. And as you can see, our region has made progress, but we are far from being perfect. A lot of countries are close to 100%, but the considerable number where the access is around 50%. And remember, catastrophic health expenditures is one of the chief cause of poverty. And older persons, one of the biggest demands is universal health care. But can I highlight one aspect? Even in countries that have achieved universal health care, it doesn't mean that they're always aging friendly. I mean, there's much work to be done. Is there an outreach component that allows you to reach out to older persons? How well is long-term care integrated? Do you have a long-term care policy or programs which are aligned to the universal health care? Government-funded long-term care programs are most successful, and they are the only ones that work in our region, especially when there are strong universal health care programs. But having said that, is what these coverage programs are lacking in are perhaps involvement of the community and addressing the needs of older persons. They are done to a more or lesser extent, but have to be taken care of that just attaining universal healthcare coverage doesn't mean that every older person's needs are satisfied. There's a lot of work to be done for reorienting healthcare coverage to address the needs of older persons. Next slide, please. Again, income security. We have the proportion of our population above statutory retirement age, which is receiving a pension, very strong in North and Central Asia, very strong in East and Northeast Asia especially, but not so high, especially when you look at countries in the ASEAN region and in South Asia. Well below the global average and well below the Asia-Pacific average. And I don't think we are preparing very well too, despite what's happening. Why? Because we have a huge informal economy. Even young people working today are working in sectors where they're not necessarily contributing to a pension scheme. Most of the pension coverage that you see here is often social pensions of variable amounts, often not very high, even when they're getting it. So you need to prepare better. So the biggest elephant in the room is the informal economy that we have. And they are, obviously, we need to look at how we are going to ensure not only older persons of today getting the pensions or income security that they deserve through social pensions, but to ensure the young people, the future older persons, are contributing to pension systems. Paul, I'll be just 5 more minutes. I'll go fast. Next slide, please. And of course, accessible and age-friendly housing and infrastructure is a must. Singapore is a very, very wonderful. There are many cities in our region which are doing very well. But by and large, I think accessibility, and we have here a big opportunity to work with the disability agenda that we have, and to really build age-friendly housing and infrastructure. And I'll talk about the intergenerational part soon too. Next slide, please. We also know I talked about the linkage to digital and the technology revolution that's taking place. But in our region, the age and gender-specific digital divide is a reality. So older women have a double whammy here. Women have lesser access, older persons have lesser access, and older women are perhaps having the least access to internet or to IT technology. Next slide, please. I'd like to focus on one big issue when we look ahead, and that's going to be covered in depth. And it has a big implication for the way we provide care or the way we plan care and the way we think older people should be taken care of. We know that we take pride, and often you will hear this being talked about, that in Asia Pacific, we have a tradition. We look after our older persons within families. We don't need. But I want you to look at the second last column. The number of single-person households are growing. They're the largest growing segment. And my friend Vivian Liu here from Hong Kong, she's going to talk a lot more about that and a few others. We have almost 30%. If you look at countries like Australia, look at countries like, even countries like Korea and Japan, right across, you will have almost 30% of households are single-person households. Some of them are young people living alone, but the majority are older persons living alone, and it's older women often. And so when you talk about older persons being looked after, the concept of family really is, what do you want? I mean, what do we think is going to happen here? And we really have to look at that. That do they really, we want family? They depend on a family, but where is the family? Next slide, please. Paul, you referred to this. This is for the first time, and I'd like to then move on to what are the opportunities and what we need to look at. For the first time, we have coexistence of persons in different age groups living together at the same time in significant numbers. Older persons, youth, younger people. So the issue of intergenerational solidarity, relations, whatever you call it, has to be taken into account. And the policy is there. And it actively needs to be promoted. It needs to go from being just a jargon to actually to the policy space. And there are examples how this is being done. And I could give that, but we'll go on to that later. Next slide, please. And these intergenerational relations are expressed right throughout, across a domain of areas. One, it's manifest in care. I mean, in terms of who is providing the care. Initially, it's of course, when you look at childcare, it's obviously parents providing it to children, but as you get older, who's providing care to older persons? In learning, there's a lot older persons can contribute to younger people, and younger persons in turn contributing the co-tutoring. The labor market, the perception that as older people, if we want older people to work longer in the labor market, will it affect the job prospects of younger people? There's been enough studies which show that this is not a zero-sum game. But this is where another interaction happens. The digital world, definitely. There's a lot that the younger people can teach older people, not only in terms of teaching them how to use digital technology, but also using digital technology to reach out to them and perhaps alleviate loneliness. In terms of housing, how do we have housing that allows intergenerational interactions? There are examples from Europe where students are housed in older persons' homes free of charge, provided to provide some services, which alleviates the loneliness of older persons, and on the other hand, also alleviates the housing needs of the younger people. And I already talked about living arrangements. I mean, younger people, even if they are not living with their parents, is it possible that they could live next to their parents, close to their parents? But you also have younger people sometimes returning to live with their parents. And this is something that will be expanded on much more in terms of these dynamics. when we talk about family and intergenerational relations within a family, but we got to lift it out and see how, in the context of a society, what does it mean? In the way we extend care, in the way we really take care of our older persons. Next slide, please. So I like to just look at the fact that, look, as we have older populations, we really have to look at the inclusivity and sustainability of social protection systems. And that's a given, and I'm not going to stress too much on that. The second issue of providing health security, but it's not just curative care that you extend. It's so much about developing long-term care systems and also strengthening the role of community in the way you deliver this healthcare to older persons. I don't think that we have looked at the role of community strongly enough. I think they could play a very big role, especially in the context where the family structures may be changing. How do we support that? How we change the concept of the family to really include perhaps the role of community to step in and serve as a bigger, wider family. I think decent work in the care economy. Care economy is not just it. When you have more women joining the labor force, you create a care economy which itself can be an employment generator. Creating multi-generational workforces, I talked about it. We have people, even in Singapore and in other countries, where older persons are working for a much longer time. But we should be looking at flexible retirement. Looking at retirement, obviously we can't expect all older persons to work longer. It depends on what kind of profession you're in. If I'm a truck driver, I may not want to continue as a truck driver, but I can be reskilled to do something else. So the question is, how? Keep it flexible, look at the needs of older persons, and look how we can then promote multi-generational workforces and promote intergenerational solidarity. I cannot state this more. The specific vulnerability and needs of older women is a must. And of course, supporting varied living arrangements, respecting cultural nuances and norms, and strengthening the role of the community. That's going to be a focus of a lot of the discussions. That has to be a must in a number of countries in our region as we look ahead. And these are some of the issues that we think are going to come up for consideration at the next review of MIPA. At least when MIPA was adopted in 2002, the world was very different. Today, the world is very, very different. And I hope the discussion that we'll have will squarely put intergenerational solidarity at the center of those discussions, the role of community at the center of discussions. And I hope that discussions like this will help really, for us to really prepare some of our thoughts, organize them, structure them so that we can inform those discussions well. Next slide. I think I'm at the end. Thank you very much for your patience. Thank you very much indeed to Sao Foundation for calling me here.